Over the next 20 years, an estimated $124 trillion is going to change hands between generations. The financial press calls this the Great Wealth Transfer. It is the largest movement of wealth in human history. By comparison, the entire United States economy produces about $28 trillion in GDP per year. We are talking about more than 4 years of total US economic output, sitting in inheritances, waiting to be distributed. The headlines treat this as good news for millennials and Gen X. Articles use phrases like, the wealthiest generation in history is about to share its fortune. Personal finance influencers tell their followers to prepare for an inheritance windfall. The wealth management industry has launched entire new business lines specifically to capture fees on this transfer. Almost none of it is true for most people, because when you do the actual math, the Great Wealth Transfer is not really a generational transfer at all. It is the largest concentration of wealth in human history, hiding inside a story that sounds optimistic. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how this transfer is structured, who actually gets the money, why the wealth gap is about to become functionally permanent, and what to do whether you are receiving an inheritance or not. Let me start with the basic numbers. The original estimate came from Cerulli Associates, a research firm in 2020. They projected that baby boomers and the silent generation would transfer about $84 trillion to their heirs and to charity by 2045. That number has since been revised upward to about $124 trillion due to stock market and real estate growth since COVID. Some firms now project the total could reach $140 trillion or more by 2048. Of this, about $72 trillion goes directly to heirs. Roughly $12 trillion goes to charity. The rest gets eaten by taxes, fees, and estate administration costs. Now here is the part the headlines do not mention. According to research compiled by the World Economic Forum and others, the wealthiest 10% of households will receive 56% of all intergenerational transfers. The bottom 50% of households will receive 8%. Read that again. The richest 10% get 56%. The bottom half of the country gets 8%. That is not a redistribution. That is the largest wealth concentration in modern history, wrapped in language that sounds like opportunity. It gets more extreme when you look at the highest tier. Just 2% of households, the high net worth and ultra high net worth families, will transfer about 50% of the total value. That works out to roughly $62 trillion moving inside an extremely small group of families. Most of that wealth has been compounding for 2 or 3 generations already. It is now positioned to compound for several more. The disparity comes from 2 underlying realities. First, wealthy boomers are over twice as likely to leave inheritances at all compared to working-class boomers. Working and middle-class boomers spend most of their savings on healthcare, long-term care, and retirement expenses. By the time they die, their net worth is often near zero. The bottom 50% of boomers will leave less than $50,000 on average. The top 10% will leave several $1,000,000 on average. The gap between those numbers is what compounds across generations. Second, the wealth that does get passed down is concentrated in assets that grow. Real estate, stocks, business ownership, private equity stakes. Those assets generate ongoing income and appreciate in value. An heir who inherits $1 million in index funds at age 35 will likely have $8 to $10 million by retirement without doing anything. An heir who inherits $25,000 in cash will spend most of it within 3 years on debt, housing, or emergencies. Same transfer event, completely different outcome 20 years later. Now here is another piece almost nobody covers. A significant portion of the wealth transfer is not even happening between generations. It is happening between spouses. Boomers tend to die in their 80s. Their first transfer of wealth is usually to their surviving spouse, not their children. Industry estimates suggest about $54 trillion will pass between spouses before reaching the next generation. About 40 trillion of that will end up with widowed women, who often outlive their husbands by 8 to 12 years. This means the actual intergenerational transfer is delayed by a decade or more on average. Most Gen X and millennial heirs will not receive their full inheritances until they are in their late 50s or 60s, by which time they are already retired or near retirement. The transfer happens too late to actually change most of their lives. The wealth management industry is fully aware of all of this. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, and the major private banks have made the Great Wealth Transfer their single largest growth priority. They are not pursuing this opportunity because they want to help heirs build wealth. They are pursuing it because the asset management fees on $124 trillion in transferred assets at 1% annually equals over $1 trillion per year in revenue for the financial industry. That is the actual prize they are chasing. Here is what to actually do. If you are receiving an inheritance, your single most important decision is what you do with it within the first 90 days. Most people who receive an inheritance under $500,000 spend most of it within 3 years on debt repayment, lifestyle upgrades, or family obligations. If you want the money to compound, you need to lock most of it into low-cost index funds before you have time to think about what else to do with it. Vanguard's Total Stock Market Index, ticker VTI, is the standard choice. Set up an automatic dollar cost average over 6 to 12 months. Do not chase individual stocks. Do not buy a more expensive car. The compounding only works if you protect the principal. If you are not receiving an inheritance, plan as if you will receive nothing. Most people in your situation will be financially better off assuming zero inheritance and then being pleasantly surprised, rather than waiting for an inheritance that either does not come, or comes too late, or comes already spent on end-of-life care. Build your wealth as if the system will not save you, because for the bottom 50% of Americans, statistically, it will not. The path to wealth for everyone outside the top 10% is roughly the same it has been for 50 years. Maximize earned income through skill development, save aggressively, invest in index funds and real estate, live below your means. There is no shortcut. There is no inheritance fairy. The great wealth transfer is happening, but for 90% of the country, it is happening to other people. Here is the broader takeaway. For most of the 20th century, American wealth was somewhat redistributed each generation. Estate taxes ate into large fortunes. Business failures destroyed accumulated capital. Wars and economic crises reset balance sheets. The wealthy stayed mostly wealthy, but the gap between generations was bounded. That is ending. The current structure of the wealth transfer is essentially a feedback loop. Wealthy families inherit, invest in compounding assets, leave more wealth to their children, who inherit, invest, and leave even more. Each generation increases the gap. Within 50 years, the United States is on track to look more like the European aristocracies of the 1800s, where family lineage determined economic outcomes more than individual effort. But there is one piece of this story I have not told you yet, because while the wealth concentration is happening at the family level, an even bigger shift is happening at the institutional level. The same wealthy families that benefit from the great wealth transfer are also positioned to capture an even larger transfer happening in the next 10 years, one that does not get nearly enough coverage. In the next video, I am going to show you exactly what that transfer is, why it could be larger than the generational one, and the one industry that is positioned to capture the most value from it.